Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Thank you again, as always, for being with us on this Bible study. Glad to be able to connect with you in this time of pandemic. We always like to emphasize how important it is to stay connected. So again, thank you for being with us. Bonnie and I are happy to have George Schmidt with us today, joining in to look at Matthew 22, 1 to 14, the parable of the wedding banquet.
Once more Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came to see the guest, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. And the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'"
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
So we typically start off by asking our guest, is there anything that kind of drew your attention here, George, or something that stood out to you?
Well, as I said before we started, if this was the only text we had, it would be sad. I mean, we'd be missing out on so much. So thank God we have the whole Bible.
Right. Because this really, if we go in, if we sort through the parable and we say that the king is God, this sounds like a very judgmental God, right?
Yes.
And so good that we have the rest of it to look at as well. Something that drew my attention was in verse 3, where it says, he sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet. And here's interesting to me, but they would not come. I mean, it wasn't that they could not come. They refused to go. And so it's interesting for me is that, you're invited to a banquet where everything is going to be provided for you. And later we find out even you're going to be given clothes to wear to the banquet. Everything's provided for you. But they would not go. Yeah. That really caught my attention about how much their focus was on other things rather than on this celebration that was happening in their midst. Yeah.
I want to hit on what you said again about if this were the only text of the Bible that we had, it wouldn't sound like good news. In seminary, I think all three of us, I hope you all were taught like I was, that there is always good news to be found in almost any pericope, any section of the Bible that you could look up. But this is one that I'm having a tough time finding good news. You would get to the end of this on a Sunday and you would want to say, "This is the gospel of the Lord," but I would want to say, "This is the gospel of the Lord."
And then, thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Right.
With a question at the end of it, definitely. So what do we make of that? Is this a final judgment? Or is it a warning? Is it a wake-up call? What are your thoughts?
Well, I went to a commentary and it helped. The wedding banquet, you got two invitations. You got like a save the date,
Yes.
and then you got when the wedding was ready. Then you got, it's ready, come on. And then here God's given 3 invitations. And
Yeah.
so the good news is the good and the bad.
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether you're good or bad. That's good news to me.
Mhm.
And so that came out, that, you know, there's the good and the bad. So I can be included. And at this, of course, you go to the classical, that what does this mean? Who are these characters? Who's the owner? Who's the son? Who are the slaves? There's another interesting thing. A lot of texts change that word slave to servant.
Yes.
That's another thing I picked up on.
Yes.
So who are these, and who does it represent? Who are the troops? Who's everyone good and bad?
Right.
Who's the one without the robe?
Right.
And so figuring those people out in the parable, who are they?
Well, it kind of follows a lot the parable
Yes.
on Sunday in terms of the cast of characters. You have either a king or a landowner, someone who has kind of the authority to enlist, invite, throw a banquet, own land. And then you have slaves, servants, you have those either invited to the banquet or those enlisted to tend a vineyard. You have troops could be seen as slaves too. So a lot of similarities between the two, I think.
Well, you know what I noticed too is, now I've not ever been under the rule of a king, so I don't really always know what that entails. But I do know this, that if you were invited by the king to be present at anything, you didn't refuse. You did not refuse. And so here they are just blatantly refusing. And a commentary I read said that they were working out their own worth. And they were not looking to the king. In this sense, God is the one who gives us our worth through Jesus Christ. They were working out their own worth. So they were placing their worth in their land, in their homes, in their families, and all of these other things. And so what they're saying to God is, you know, I know that you are a good king, and I know that you give me whatever I need. However, I'm going to stay back here and work out my own worth.
Right.
And not come. Because the worthiness here is that God is providing everything. I mean, that's still the case for us.
Yeah.
God provides us everything we need. So we fall into sin, and God could have, in the very beginning, kicked Adam and Eve out of that. I mean, God could have said, okay, I'm done. We're going to start all over.
Yeah.
But God saved them and continues to save us and continues to forgive us and continues to give us everything we need. I wonder, too, if they were looking at their wants. Isn't that our wants? Now, our needs and wants are two different things. So they were getting what they needed, but what they wanted drew them away from the king.
Sure.
Caused that separation. And so I think that's why they refused to go, is because they're feeling like, well, we're taking care of ourselves.
They're relying
We don't
on,
need you.
Yeah, they're relying not on God, not
Right.
on the king's invitation, but their own. Robert Farrar Capon said something about when we read that they were found to be not worthy.
Yeah.
That's a troubling statement, I think,
Yeah.
to the three of us. But they viewed the king as maybe so providing, so good, that they could busy themselves. They could not accept the invitation and do what they wanted rather than what they needed. And again, I go back to this being kind of a wake-up call that outside the banquet is death, inside is life. They have been invited to a life-giving banquet. And so I think this harsh language is meant to be emphatic and to make the point of what is death and what is life. And again, if they found their worth in farm, business, family, everything outside of the banquet, then that's what they found worth in, when all they needed was the faith to accept the invitation. So.
this might be way out in left field, but thinking.
And we like way out in the field.
That they could go and say, well, God, you gave me the farm.
Yes.
You gave me the business. You gave me this family. You gave me this. And so I'm just, I'm going about what you gave me. And so they get about the creation rather than the creator. The same thing Adam and Eve did.
Right.
Creation, they could do it on their own, and I can be my own boss. And I think it's significant. Do you think it's significant that it's a wedding banquet? Because so much of the text, again, I go back to the commentaries I looked at, and the importance of the wedding banquet, and what a total insult it would be to refuse to go to a wedding banquet. You're invited, and you just...
For the prince. I mean, technically, this is the prince you're refusing to go to his wedding. Yeah.
So I think, in wedding banquets, they, like I said before, they got invites, and then it was all ready. And so everything's ready.
Right.
I mean, he has everything prepared. And he's expecting everyone to come. And why wouldn't you?
Right.
Except now you're focused on your own thing.
And the thing is, I mean, this is... The king goes out and destroys the city with the people who wouldn't come, destroys the city. I think this is sort of an odd scene. So the king's out there destroying the city while the servants are back keeping the food warm. Because the wedding's still going to happen. I mean, it just is that now the king sends out his servants into the streets to collect now. And so, but they're going out into the streets that are destroyed. I mean, these streets are destroyed, but they're going out to find out the good and the bad. Anybody who's there who will accept the invitation now is invited. So the first group wouldn't come. And the second group is invited out of the ashes of the city, out of the ashes of the people who said no. And they're invited in and invited to be a part of this great celebration.
And I think that's the unexpected truth to tie it into the sermon theme for the month. The unexpected truth of it is those most invited, most expected to be at the banquet, those with maybe the most acumen or privilege wouldn't come to a beautiful wedding banquet with everything provided. And then what does God, the king, what does the king do? Finds the most unexpected, the good and the bad, like you said. And I think that's how the Gospels and the parables always kind of flip the religious thinking of the day. Oh, well, they wouldn't be invited, would they? But, well, they would be. And, what you would like to hear is that the king invited the good, the bad, and the expected. But Jesus kind of plays it a bit differently to make a point about the way that the religious elite have behaved.
Yes. I think that's the big piece here is that we have to understand this is Matthew. And Matthew is talking to the religious leaders here and saying, hey, you were invited in. You've always been invited in, but you're refusing. And I think it goes back to, they could have said, but you gave us the law. I mean, the big piece of this was that the religious leaders had too much of a relationship with the law, and they were so bound to the law and so rigid with that they couldn't see that it was relationship with others that needed to happen. And so, but they could have come back and said, but God, you gave us the law, right? You gave us the law, and so we're just doing what we think that you need us to do. And God's saying, I didn't give you that law. You created that law. I gave you the law that you needed. You created a law that you wanted so that you could, in essence, the reality is that even the religious leaders were oppressing the people. And they were oppressing the people with the law. They weren't free to think and believe and do on their own. And maybe that's who's invited in next. They're not oppressed anymore. They're free. And the good and the bad can come in and be a part of the celebration.
Thing I noticed in the commentary that it was customary that the host provided garments for the people to wear And so I had all kind of questions about the garment, where do they come from? How do you get it? Who provides it? Do I get it myself? Do I purchase it? Does God give it to me? And I refuse to wear it. And so that garment thing was very puzzling for me.
And I wish I had more insight to shed on that. I would like to ask, to both of you, why do you think the gifts of love and grace and acceptance, why? Because what we see is that being turned down. And we do that too, don't we? Why are those gifts so tough to accept sometimes? If you had a banquet meal laid out before you, which we do all the time in the forgiveness of God, but we don't always eat of it, partake of it, do we?
I think Pastor Bonnie said at the beginning, we want to do it on our own. We want to do our own. We want to have our own success, have our own, earn our own way.
You really have to humble yourself to accept someone else's graciousness and say, I can do this on my own. I can do this on my own. And unfortunately, I think that's how we're taught, is that you do it on your own. And I can't remember now if this is in something George is with us on our Thursday evening anti-racism talks. And I can't remember now which one of them. I've been to so many classes and things, I don't remember where it is, but we teach that you take care of yourself, because what some people will say in response to racism or poverty or any of the isms is, we'll let them pick themselves up with their own bootstraps. Have you heard that?
Sure.
Let them pick themselves up with their own bootstraps. And the one piece that I was listening to was, how can you do that if you don't have any boots?
Right.
If you don't have any boots. So we want people to be worthy to take care of themselves, and yet we are. It's like the wedding robe. The God provides a wedding robe for everybody, so everybody has the same thing, right? But here we are as people going, well, we're not going to give you a wedding robe. You get your own. That's not for us to do. Pick yourself up from your own bootstraps. Yeah. And the other thing it said was, so we're telling that to people who don't even own boots, while we own 2 pair of boots. And so it was the justice issue of that. And I thought that was really a good thing. And I think a piece of this is a justice issue as well, in that the first ones invited in don't go. I mean, there's this wonderful celebration, but then that the king turns this and makes it a justice issue, and invites in the ones who can't repay him. Not that the king expected anyone to repay him, but that he invited in the ones who were most vulnerable.
The banquet was always open to everyone anyway.
Yeah.
But this was highlighting the refusal of the initial invitees. It was highlighting, don't you see how the point that you're missing? Do you see what you're... so it was definitely a condemning parable, but it was, again, I don't believe it to be a final judgment. I believe it to be a wake-up call.
Yeah.
And classically, the white robe of righteousnthis is what the garment is. It's that we are made right through the blood of Jesus Christ. And that this is, and the Jews and Israeli, they were much more communal than we think are. And so you have Ezra and Nehemiah that are confessing the sins of the past. They get the people together, they confess they have a corporate sin, and all the things that came down from the past that were evil were visited upon the modern day Israel. Ezra's confessing, and then Jesus says, you killed the prophets. You killed, and so that's him going out and killing these God's slaves, God's servants that are coming out. And so we have this corporate confession to make, and that we are part of our history as a community. What we did as a nation, we have to somehow say that and hold it up and say, yeah, we did that. And I, as a nation, as an American, as a Christian, I didn't make my own righteousness.
Right.
I'm part of this evil that has happened. I'm part of the sin, and I'm living the consequences of that. And now we need to wake up and say, yep, I was part of that. We did that as a nation, and we need to take care of the residue of that sin. We need to fix it.
And a part of it is that everybody's invited to the wedding. Even now, everybody's invited to the wedding. And so a piece of justice is making sure that everybody is invited.
Right.
And is able to come. And with that, I think, I'm just going to say this about the robe. I wonder if the robe gives a sense of equality in the wedding. Is that everybody has the same thing on, so nobody looks, if everybody's invited, some people aren't going to have good clothes to wear, right? Yeah. But the robe gives a sense of everybody's the same, everybody's equal. And to George's, it reminds me of the robe in Revelation. You know, the ones who came through the ordeal had the white robes on, and it was the blood of the Lamb. Absolutely.
So a final point about that, I'm talking to pastors today, but in seminary, I found it amazing, like, to learn what the purpose of the alb, the robe, was. I thought, you know, wouldn't that make me look better than, holier than? But it's meant to be a symbol of unity. It's meant to be plain, and to not emphasize differences of economic background that clothing unintentionally can do.
Right.
So if I wear a tie or a nice suit or of any kind, that might emphasize my, you know, my banking account or my wealth in some way that might make somebody else feel less than.
Yeah.
The alb is meant to be unifying. It's meant to be plain and not to emphasize gender identity or wealth identity or any of those things that can unlevel the playing field. And I see that maybe here at the end too with the wedding robe. It not only provides an identity of who has been invited, who is a guest at the banquet, but to tie it to the robes that we often wear, it's the symbol of unity and leveling the playing field.
One of our professors said it declassifies you.
Yeah.
I like that.
Declassifies you.
It's a good way to put it.
And the point to this robe, excuse me, is that everyone invited to the wedding banquet gets one. Everyone. Yeah. And I think that might be a good way to end.
That's a good place.
That everyone invited to the banquet gets a robe. George, we're so glad you're here with us today.
Yes,
good conversation. We love doing this.
Thank you for the insights.
Yes.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. If you have any comments, if you'd like to connect with us and follow up on any of the thoughts that we either covered or maybe did not cover adequately today, you can leave a comment on YouTube. You can email us. You can comment on Facebook. And we'd love to find ways to keep that dialogue going with you. Thank you again for being with us. We hope to see you on Sunday. Please see the worship sign-ups online even today, and we hope to be with you again soon.